I was 22, at my old friend Nick's house for a Halloween party. Nick, who tragically passed away from a heroin overdose in 2013, used to throw epic Halloween bashes every year. His parents were always away in New York, so Nick had free rein to go all out. The house was filled with some of the creepiest decorations you could imagine. Things Nick had clearly spent way too much money on. He even built a haunted maze using walls of cardboard, covering them with wallpaper to make it even more eerie. Everything was pretty wild that night, but I'll skip over the usual party chaos. The real trouble started when things took a sharp turn. The moment it all changed. I'll admit, we weren't in our right minds. None of us were. Anyone who came to Nick's parties knew what went down. Me, Nick, and a few other guys, Vinny G, Joey, and Q, were upstairs in Nick's room smoking a bong when we heard two steady, loud bangs come from downstairs. Nick, clumsily but panicking, rushed to open the door and see what was going on. There were sounds of screaming, both guys and girls. I remember quite clearly, it sounded as if there were a crowd of people screaming for their lives down there. We all called Nick to come back in and shut the door. Even under the influence of drugs, we all knew what was going on. Nick ran back inside and shut the door quickly but quietly, locking it behind him. He turned to us with the facial expression of someone who had just witnessed murder. "What did you see? What's going on?" we all shouted at him. He told us to hide before anything else. We all knew why from that point on. We didn't ask questions. Nick hit the lights and hid in the closet with Joey, while I hid under the bed with Q. Vinny G hid in the storage box. We could hear the blasting music from downstairs turn off, followed by a grown man screaming at everyone to shut up. One unfortunate girl let out a scream of shock and fear, and after another bang, silence. The man started shouting at everyone again, but personally, I couldn't hear it too well, and I certainly wouldn't remember exactly what he was shouting. We heard two other men shouting. By now, there were confirmed 3 intruders in the house, but there could have been more for all we knew. At that point, we heard the sound of boots stomping up the stairs, and then coming halfway down the hall, stopping outside the bedroom door. The intruder on the other side of the door tried the doorknob, but when he realized it was locked, he started ramming into the door with most likely his shoulder. After a few failed attempts at that, the sound of a few shots to the doorknob were clearly enough to break the lock, allowing the door to swing open. We heard cries from downstairs after the shots to the doorknob, followed by silence and then a gunshot. Me and Nick had our hands over our mouths to shield our breathing noises. I watched through the transparent cloth that hung from the bottom of Nick's bed as the black boots with overlapping, ripping denim jeans moved instinctively to the closet. He opened the door. I could hear Nick begging for the intruder not to kill him, offering a generous amount of money if they would leave. Nick gave himself up as the house owner. That's when the intruder ordered him downstairs. The rest of us stayed put. Apparently, Joey hadn't been caught with Nick. We stayed under the bed, shaking and afraid. There was near silence from downstairs, other than Nick talking with the intruders, but whatever they were saying was much too low for us to hear. It felt like a near 20 minutes before the front door slammed shut, and Nick came running back upstairs to tell us that they were gone. I think the most horrifying moment of my life was when I stepped downstairs back into the living room and saw the 2 dead bodies lying lifelessly on the ground, their heads spewing out blood. Jen and Robbie, 2 good friends that I still miss. I'll spare you the details of what happened when the police arrived, but despite the fact that the house smelled like a marijuana greenhouse, the police were more interested in finding out who the masked men were that killed 2 innocent college students. Oh yeah, Nick told the 4 of us who were hiding in his room that there were 4 intruders in total, all wearing fedoras, vendetta masks, coats, and gloves. They demanded $100,000 in cash, and when Nick could not provide it, they demanded he fill their empty sack with his most valued possessions. All the partygoers held hostage in the room were also forced to throw their wallets into the sack, where they would be shot. After the incident, Nick became depressed. He started drinking too much and became an alcoholic. He stopped showing up to school and ultimately ended up dropping out. He started the use of heavier drugs, such as meth and heroin. I had one good talk with him since the incident, and he was more real during this talk than he had ever been. He told me, with tears rolling down his cheeks and a pipe in his hand, that he lived in constant pain, knowing he caused the death of 2 of his best friends. Nick died of a heroin overdose in July of 2013, not even a year after the incident. It was my first Halloween living in my own house, away from my parents. I lived in a small corner house with a basement but no upstairs, a house my parents paid half for. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was sitting in the living room watching scary Halloween movies when I found myself getting up to answer a knock at the door. But then I stopped and thought, who could be at the door at 11 p.m.? Surely there were no more trick-or-treaters out? I had a pretty good feeling it was a late-night Halloween ding-dong ditcher, so I gave it a second. Then I shot a glance to the porch through the window. Nobody was there. Yep, ding-dong ditchers. I sat back down, not thinking twice about it. Again, knocking at the front door. "Get lost!" I yelled. I was not in the mood for punky kids. They ignored my demands and started pounding. Not just knocking. I was pissed. Now, I leapt up and swung the door open. Nobody was there. Once again, I slipped on my shoes and headed outside to begin searching the bushes for the kids, but there was nobody in sight. Not in the bushes, not behind my car, not across the street. I was done answering. I didn't want to feed into their fun anymore. So I went back inside, double-locked the door, and went to my bedroom, also locking that door just to feel safer. I guess even over the TV, I could still hear the stupid kids pounding on my front door repeatedly. I was so close to calling the cops to get them away, but that would undoubtedly lead to my house being egged or TP'd. The pounding continued for an uncomfortably long time, more than half an hour. I thought these kids must be filming something for YouTube and were desperate for a reaction, but I wasn't going to give it to them. At some point, I dozed off with the TV on, only to wake up to the knocking again. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. How could those kids still be at it? I thought. I turned off the TV and sat up with my ears open for a few moments. My heart completely stopped as I realized the knocking was not at my front door, but rather at my bedroom door. I jumped out of bed, looking around my room like a madman for something to use as a weapon. They knew I was awake now. They were trying the doorknob, trying to bust down the door. These weren't any kids. By some miracle, I came up with an idea. It was a long shot, but it was all I could think of. I turned on the receiver to my speaker system, plugged in my iPhone, brought up the YouTube app, typed in 45 gunshot sound effect, turned up the volume, and pressed play. The sound of a gunshot echoed out of the speakers. It sounded real enough. I paused the video after the first shot and yelled, "That was a warning shot. Leave now, or I won't hesitate to shoot you in the head." And it worked. I heard 2 pairs of footsteps stomping over my wood floors and out the front door. I gave it a moment before opening my bedroom door and peeking outside. They were gone, but the front door was left wide open. I quickly shut it, called the police, and that's where my story ended.